Hello, my name's Carlisle. And last week, my own sister tore up a $45,000 check with my name on it, right there in front of everyone at the bank. She looked me dead in the eye and told security to throw me out like a criminal. They didn't know that one phone call from me could change everything. I wasn't just another customer. I was the woman who owned the company they all worked for. But that's not even the worst part. Because the truth didn't just expose her, it exposed what my whole family had been hiding for years. You ever wonder how far your own blood would go just to see you humiliated? I arrived at the Met Gala later than I should have. My driver had canceled last minute, so I booked a rideshare like any ordinary woman heading to one of the most exclusive events in the country. The car smelled faintly of lemon wipes and nervous ambition. As the city lights blurred past the tinted window, I rehearsed the same question in my head. Why was I still showing up? The night air outside the museum buzzed with camera flashes and the chatter of stylists fixing last-minute details. I stepped out quietly, smoothing the hem of my black dress. It wasn't one of those extravagant designs screaming for attention. It was simple, tailored from a fabric my company had engineered, a material that looked like silk but was sustainable and self-cleaning. I had made it months ago for tonight, but no one in my family knew that. Ahead of me, my sister Isolde was already on the red carpet, glowing under the press lights like she was born there. Her sequined gown shimmered gold, her laughter even brighter. The family surrounded her, our mother, cousins, aunts, all perfectly posed. I stood at the edge of the crowd, invitation in hand, waiting for someone to notice me. No one did. I smiled to myself and walked forward anyway. When I reached the check-in table, the coordinator scanned my invitation, nodded politely, and let me in. Inside, the ballroom pulsed with violins and camera clicks. Waiters moved through the space, balancing trays of champagne and truffle bites. I could hear my sister's voice somewhere behind me, her laugh cutting through the music. I tried to focus on the art displays instead. Every year, the Met paired fashion with a historical theme. This year was Resurgence. I almost laughed at the irony. The lights danced across mirrors and metal structures, and for a moment I saw my own reflection, alone, quiet, but intact. As I wandered, I caught sight of my family again. Isolde was surrounded by designers, photographers, and board members of her fashion label. She was the family's pride, the face of success. I could almost hear my mother's words from years ago. Isolde was born to shine. You've always preferred the shadows. They weren't wrong. I had learned to build quietly. The memories came easily that night, growing up, watching Isolde charm every teacher, every guest, every boyfriend who came through our front door. I was always the extra one, the little sister they forgot in the corner. Back then, I thought if I worked hard enough, I could earn their affection. Later, I realized affection wasn't a currency they traded in. I had spent the last 10 years building a company they didn't believe existed. My firm had created fabrics that major fashion houses now relied on, though none of them knew the face behind the brand. I had funded Isolde's company once, quietly, anonymously, just to see if she could stand on her own. She never knew. Maybe that's what made tonight sting less. I already knew how invisible I was to them. A soft clink of glass snapped me back to the present. I turned and there she was, Isolde, walking toward me with that same camera-ready smile that could slice through concrete. "Well," she said, eyes scanning me from head to toe, "they're really letting anyone in this year." I blinked once, steady. "Hello, Isolde. You look expensive." Her grin faltered. I thought they had waitstaff in uniforms. "What are you doing here, Opal?" "I had an invitation," I said simply. "Like everyone else." "You?" She laughed, short and sharp, glancing at her friends. "Darling, this isn't one of those charity mixers you sneak into. This is the Met Gala. Real designers. Real sponsors." "I'm aware," I replied. My voice was calm, even kind. "That's why I'm here." She reached out, fingers brushing my sleeve. "Oh, honey, that fabric, it's odd. Who made that for you?" I met her eyes. I did. Something in her expression shifted. The room seemed to lean closer. She let out a brittle laugh, the kind that makes everyone else nervous. "Of course you did. Playing dress up now. Maybe you should stick to whatever it is you do these days." I didn't answer. Silence was easier. It always had been. But then she did something that broke that silence forever. Before I could move, Isolde grabbed the back seam of my dress and pulled. The sound of tearing fabric sliced through the music. Gasps spread like wildfire. My skin felt the cool rush of air where the material split open. "She's not even supposed to be here," she shouted. "Security, get her out." A waiter dropped his tray nearby. Cameras turned. Someone whispered my name, but not in recognition, more like confusion. I felt 100 eyes trying to decide whether I belonged. For a second, I almost laughed. The absurdity of it all, the family, the hypocrisy, the stage she craved so badly. Then the humiliation hit me like heat on the back of my neck. A guard started toward me. His face looked sympathetic, but his steps were firm. I held my ground. My voice didn't rise. "You really don't know, do you?" Isolde frowned. "Know what? That you can't keep embarrassing us." I stared at her, at the woman who had spent years climbing over everyone, including me, to stand beneath these lights. "No," I said softly, "that you just tore up more than a dress." Her confusion deepened, but I didn't explain. I wasn't going to give her a speech. The guard hesitated, waiting for my move. The crowd still whispered, torn between pity and gossip. I straightened my shoulders, adjusted what remained of my gown, and turned toward the nearest exit. Every step felt heavier, but something inside me was lightening. This wasn't shame. It was release. At the doorway, I paused, glanced back once at my sister surrounded by glitter and flashbulbs, and said, just loud enough for her to hear, "You have no idea what you've just started." Then I walked out. She didn't just tear a dress. She tore open a storm I've kept locked for years. The moment I stepped out of that ballroom, the sound of music and applause behind me melted into a muffled hum. It felt like walking out of one world and back into another, one I had lived in most of my life, where silence was louder than noise. The satin hem of my torn dress brushed against my legs as I moved through the hallway, half hidden in the shadow of marble columns. The chandelier light bounced on the floor, a cruel reminder of the world that had just turned its back on me again. A staff member caught sight of me. His expression softened. Without asking questions, he offered a shawl from the service counter nearby. "Here, miss," he said gently. "You shouldn't have to walk around like that." I thanked him and wrapped it around my shoulders. The fabric wasn't expensive, but it was enough to give me dignity back. I walked toward the side lounge, passing clusters of guests whispering in small groups. Some avoided my eyes. Others didn't bother hiding their curiosity. One woman murmured to her friend, "Isn't that Isolde Marin's sister?" Another replied, "Poor thing. What did she do to deserve that?" I didn't stop to answer. I had learned long ago that the world preferred rumors over truth. I sat on a velvet chair in a quiet corner, the shawl draped loosely, my back facing the mirrored wall. The room smelled of champagne and orchids. For the first time in years, I let the weight of humiliation settle in my chest, not to drown me, but to remind me that pain can be fuel. I thought about my sister's face when she tore my dress, how easy cruelty came to her, how easily everyone accepted it as entertainment. That wasn't the first time she had stripped something from me. A year earlier, I'd been in a law office downtown, the kind where the air smelled like stale coffee and old paper. My father had passed away the previous spring, leaving behind a complex web of investments and family businesses. I didn't expect a fortune, but I expected fairness. When I sat down with a family lawyer, he looked at me like he was about to deliver bad news that wasn't his fault. "Miss Vetra," he began, his tone cautious, "it seems there's been a small administrative oversight." I tilted my head. "Oversight?" He pushed a folder across the table. Inside were the official papers for our family trust, the one our father had set up decades ago. My name wasn't there, not even as a beneficiary. I flipped through every page. "Where's my section?" "There should be." He cut me off quickly. "The trust was revised 2 months ago. It seems you relinquished your rights." "I what?" He tapped a page. "Here, your signature." I looked down. There it was, my name, written in familiar loops and curves. Except it wasn't mine. I hadn't signed a thing. "That's not me," I said, my voice steady but cold. "Who filed this?" He cleared his throat. "Your sister and your mother handled the update. They said you were moving abroad, that you wanted a clean separation from family assets." I felt my pulse tighten. You believe that? He didn't meet my eyes. I simply processed what I was given. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the paper. There were 2 witnesses listed, both employees of my sister's company. My stomach twisted. Tell me the truth, I said quietly. Did they pay you to overlook this? He froze. Miss Vetra. Save it. Just tell them I saw it. When I left his office, the late afternoon light spilled across the street. I remember standing there, the city moving around me, the truth burning like acid in my throat. My family had written me out of existence, and no one had lifted a finger to stop it. That day, something in me broke, but something else began to form in its place. 4 weeks, I didn't answer their calls. When Isolde finally reached me, she acted like nothing had happened. It's business, Opal, she said lightly. You're too sensitive about these things. Besides, you never cared about that stuff. I remember her exact tone, patronizing, like she was humoring a child. I almost laughed. You're right, I told her. I don't care about that stuff. I care about honesty. She sighed. Don't be dramatic. Dad would have wanted me to handle things. Dad would have wanted fairness, I said. Then I hung up. After that call, I promised myself something. If they wanted me erased, I would become someone too big to erase. I started over under a different company name. It began with a single idea, a fabric that could change the future of fashion. My team worked in a small studio with leaky pipes and uneven floors. No one knew the Vetra name there, they only knew mine. Slowly, the company grew. Clients came, investors followed. My designs walked runways without my face attached to them. I didn't need credit. I needed freedom. I learned the rhythm of power, the quiet kind, built on consistency and silence. Every time someone dismissed me, I filed it away. Every doubt was a spark. Within a year, my company was partnering with the same luxury houses that had once refused to even read my proposals. And I made sure one of those contracts carried the logo of my sister's label. She never knew that her gowns were built from my technology, that her empire was standing on my foundation. Now, sitting in that lounge at the Met, with whispers swirling and my shawl barely covering my ruined dress, I felt something shift inside me again. A group of guests passed by, still buzzing about the scene outside. It's all over social media, one of them whispered. Someone caught the moment on video. The sister thing. Brutal. I almost smiled. Of course it was online. Isolde always wanted publicity. She just didn't realize this time it wouldn't flatter her. A waiter approached and handed me a glass of champagne. Compliments of the bar, he said softly. You handled that with grace, ma'am. Thank you, I replied. I raised the glass, took a slow sip, and let the cool bubbles settle against the back of my throat. I could see my reflection in the mirror across the room, my hair slightly tousled, my lipstick faded, my posture steady. In the reflection behind me, someone pointed. Is that her? A man whispered. Yeah, that's Opal something. She used to be part of the Marin line. Another woman leaned closer. Used to be. She disappeared years ago. I turned slightly, met their eyes through the mirror, and smiled, a calm, knowing smile that said everything and nothing at once. They looked away first. They always did. I pulled the shawl tighter and leaned back, letting the noise fade into the background. Let them gossip. Let them invent stories. Truth had a strange way of resurfacing when people least expected it. I had spent years letting them believe I was gone, weak, forgotten. But tonight reminded me that silence wasn't weakness, it was strategy. She had torn my dress. They had forged my name. But none of that defined me. They thought I vanished. But I was only ever becoming someone they could never silence again. After a few minutes in the lounge, the buzz outside crept in like a rising tide. I could hear it through the marble walls. Snippets of gossip, the clicking of heels against polished floors, the occasional stifled laugh. The soft fabric of the shawl still clung to my shoulders, hiding what was left of the dress my sister had torn in front of strangers. It didn't bother me as much as I expected. Maybe because this wasn't new. It wasn't the first time Isolde had found a way to humiliate me, and I doubted it would be the last. I stood up slowly, thanked the staffer nearby for the champagne, and walked out of the lounge. The hallway beyond the ballroom was dimmer, quieter, and colder, not just in temperature but in atmosphere. It was the kind of silence that didn't ask questions but watched everything. I passed a mirror on the wall. My reflection looked collected, not flawless. My lipstick had faded slightly, and a few strands of hair had loosened from the updo I spent too much time perfecting. But I was still there, still walking, still upright. That mattered. As I reached the backstage corridor, the lights above flickered briefly, as if the building itself couldn't decide whether to stay polished or reveal its cracks. My heels echoed with every step, bouncing against the empty space like the ticking of a slow countdown. A few steps ahead, a production assistant darted past me, holding a clipboard and talking into a headset. 10 minutes to sponsor acknowledgement, he said into the mic, barely looking up. He didn't recognize me. That was fine. I kept walking, slowly, purposefully, until I found a corner out of the way, near a service elevator. I leaned back against the wall and let my mind drift back to the first time Isolde made sure I disappeared from something that should have had my name on it. A year ago, a deal had fallen through between her company and a high-end department store chain. It was a massive contract, 7 figures, maybe more. The press had whispered that something had gone wrong during negotiations. The buzz didn't last long, but within days, Isolde quietly implied to her board that I had interfered. That my presence, my supposed attitude on a conference call, had made the client uneasy. The truth? I wasn't even on the call. I hadn't been invited. In fact, I only found out because a colleague from that brand messaged me later. Hey, weird question. Were you on that call last week? Isolde said you threw the whole pitch sideways. I didn't respond. What was the point? By then I knew the game. They created ghosts when they needed scapegoats. And in our family, I had always been the easiest one to erase. That wasn't even the worst of it. Months before tonight, there had been a charity gala, big one, full of buzz, articles, and photos. It featured a new initiative called the Opal Vectra Youth Fund. I hadn't been contacted. No one asked permission to use my name. When I emailed the event coordinator, she apologized and said my RSVP must have been lost. We'd love for you to stop by anyway, she said. So I went. I got dressed. I showed up. And I was blocked at the door. A man in a tight tux and an earpiece stopped me cold. Name? Opal Vectra. He looked at his list. His brow creased. You're not on here. I was told I could come. He tilted his head like he'd heard that one before. Sorry. Invite only. I stood there for a moment, stunned. Through the glass doors behind him, I could see the giant display banner. Empowering Futures, the Opal Vectra Youth Fund. My name, in cursive gold lettering, right next to my sister's face. Isolde was smiling, camera ready, champagne in hand. She posed in front of the backdrop like it belonged to her. The security guy gave me that polite, dismissive smile people use when they've already moved on. You can step aside, ma'am. We've got a line building. I left without a word. Didn't fight. Didn't scream. Just walked away like I didn't care, because in our family, outrage was a luxury reserved for the golden child. Now, standing backstage with 10 minutes left before the lights turned toward the stage, I felt something different brewing inside. It wasn't rage. It wasn't grief. It was resolve. They used my name when it suited them. They erased my presence when it didn't. But every time they tried to remove me, I became stronger, quieter, smarter, more calculated. I ran a hand over the hem of my torn dress. The fabric felt soft under my fingers, like silk, but I knew better. It was one of our earliest prototypes, a fiber made from recycled materials, engineered to adapt to temperature and pressure. Lightweight, resilient, elegant. I had poured years into developing it. And that was the irony, wasn't it? Isolde didn't know. The very dress she tore apart was made by the hands of the company that kept her label afloat. She had no idea she owed half her brand's image to me. And tonight, she was about to find out. The assistant with the clipboard reappeared, breathless. 3 minutes, he called out, eyes scanning the area. Where's the sponsor speaker? She's supposed to be in position by now. I took a slow breath. I wasn't ready yet, not quite. Let them have a few more minutes of comfort. Let Isolde keep floating on the illusion that she still held the spotlight. The longer they believed they were safe, the louder the truth would land when it finally hit. Just then, a woman walked by holding a press kit folder. The edge of it caught my attention, my company's logo. Subtle. Embossed. Hidden in plain sight. She didn't know whose logo it was. Most people didn't. I had designed it that way. Another voice crackled over the headset nearby. Stage doors opening in 90 seconds. I looked at those doors. Just wood and metal and paint. But on the other side was a world built on false credit, stolen names, and carefully crafted narratives. Tonight, I wasn't walking through as a guest. I was walking in as the architect. No cameras. No spotlight. Just truth, and the silence before it shatters everything. I pushed away from the wall, heels steady, heart quiet. I was the ghost in every success they claimed until tonight. After a few minutes in the lounge, the buzz outside crept in like a rising tide. I could hear it through the marble walls, snippets of gossip, the clicking of heels against polished floors, the occasional stifled laugh. The soft fabric of a shawl still clung to my shoulders, hiding what was left of the dress my sister had torn in front of strangers. It didn't bother me as much as I expected. Maybe because this wasn't new. It wasn't the first time Isolde had found a way to humiliate me, and I doubted it would be the last. I stood up slowly, thanked the staffer nearby for the champagne, and walked out of the lounge. The hallway beyond the ballroom was dimmer, quieter, and colder, not just in temperature, but in atmosphere. It was the kind of silence that didn't ask questions but watched everything. I passed a mirror on the wall. My reflection looked collected, not flawless. My lipstick had faded slightly, and a few strands of hair had loosened from the updo I spent too much time perfecting. But I was still there, still walking, still upright. That mattered. As I reached the backstage corridor, the lights above flickered briefly, as if the building itself couldn't decide whether to stay polished or reveal its cracks. My heels echoed with every step, bouncing against the empty space like the ticking of a slow countdown. A few steps ahead, a production assistant darted past me, holding a clipboard and talking into a headset. 10 minutes to sponsor acknowledgement, he said into the mic, barely looking up. He didn't recognize me. That was fine. I kept walking, slowly, purposefully, until I found a corner out of the way, near a service elevator. I leaned back against the wall and let my mind drift back to the first time Isolde made sure I disappeared from something that should have had my name on it. A year ago, a deal had fallen through between her company and a high-end department store chain. It was a massive contract, 7 figures, maybe more. The press had whispered that something had gone wrong during negotiations. The buzz didn't last long, but within days, Isolde quietly implied to her board that I had interfered. That my presence, my supposed attitude on a conference call, had made the client uneasy. The truth? I wasn't even on the call. I hadn't been invited. In fact, I only found out because a colleague from that brand messaged me later. Hey, weird question. Were you on that call last week? Isolde said you threw the whole pitch sideways. I didn't respond. What was the point? By then I knew the game. They created ghosts when they needed scapegoats. And in our family, I had always been the easiest one to erase. That wasn't even the worst of it. Months before tonight, there had been a charity gala, big one, full of buzz, articles, and photos. It featured a new initiative called the Opal Vectra Youth Fund. I hadn't been contacted. No one asked permission to use my name. When I emailed the event coordinator, she apologized and said my RSVP must have been lost. We'd love for you to stop by anyway, she said. So I went. I got dressed. I showed up. And I was blocked at the door. A man in a tight tux and an earpiece stopped me cold. Name? Opal Vectra. He looked at his list. His brow creased. You're not on here. I was told I could come. He tilted his head like he'd heard that one before. Sorry. Invite only. I stood there for a moment, stunned. Through the glass doors behind him, I could see the giant display banner. Empowering Futures, the Opal Vectra Youth Fund. My name, in cursive gold lettering, right next to my sister's face. Isolde was smiling, camera ready, champagne in hand. She posed in front of the backdrop like it belonged to her. The security guy gave me that polite, dismissive smile people use when they've already moved on. You can step aside, ma'am. We've got a line building. I left without a word. Didn't fight. Didn't scream. Just walked away like I didn't care, because in our family, outrage was a luxury reserved for the golden child. Now, Standing backstage with 10 minutes left before the lights turned toward the stage, I felt something different brewing inside. It wasn't rage. It wasn't grief. It was resolve. They used my name when it suited them. They erased my presence when it didn't. But every time they tried to remove me, I became stronger, quieter, smarter, more calculated. I ran a hand over the hem of my torn dress. The fabric felt soft under my fingers, like silk, but I knew better. It was one of our earliest prototypes, a fiber made from recycled materials, engineered to adapt to temperature and pressure. Lightweight, resilient, elegant. I had poured years into developing it. And that was the irony, wasn't it? Isolde didn't know. The very dress she tore apart was made by the hands of the company that kept her label afloat. She had no idea she owed half her brand's image to me. And tonight, she was about to find out. The assistant with the clipboard reappeared, breathless. 3 minutes, he called out, eyes scanning the area. Where's the sponsor speaker? She's supposed to be in position by now. I took a slow breath. I wasn't ready yet, not quite. Let them have a few more minutes of comfort. Let Isolde keep floating on the illusion that she still held the spotlight. The longer they believed they were safe, the louder the truth would land when it finally hit. Just then, a woman walked by holding a press kit folder. The edge of it caught my attention, my company's logo. Subtle, embossed, hidden in plain sight. She didn't know whose logo it was. Most people didn't. I had designed it that way. Another voice crackled over the headset nearby. Stage doors opening in 90 seconds. I looked at those doors. Just wood and metal and paint. But on the other side was a world built on false credit, stolen names, and carefully crafted narratives. Tonight, I wasn't walking through as a guest. I was walking in as the architect. No cameras, no spotlight, just truth, and the silence before it shatters everything. I pushed away from the wall, heels steady, heart quiet. I was the ghost in every success they claimed until tonight. The muffled hum of the crowd was now a pulse beneath my feet. I could hear it through the thick curtain, separating the backstage corridor from the main floor, voices blending into one long note of anticipation. The sponsor presentation was minutes away, and every person back here was moving with purpose. Every person except my sister. I stood by a narrow table cluttered with bottled water and cue cards, reviewing the brief that didn't need reviewing. I already knew every line of the introduction speech, every cue, every lighting shift. It was my company funding the night, my name that would soon flash across the screens. For a moment, I thought of my father, how he taught me to keep my tone steady, my head high, no matter how small others tried to make me feel. Then came the familiar sound of heels, sharp, fast, impatient. Isolde. She appeared beside me, breath slightly uneven from trying to look unbothered while rushing over. Her perfume hit first, expensive, overpowering, the kind of scent meant to dominate space. "You're making a fool of yourself," she hissed. "You should have left quietly when you had the chance." I didn't turn around. I kept my eyes on the stage outline taped to the wall. "The difference between us," I said softly, "is that I don't need to make noise to be seen." Her reflection glared at me from the mirror opposite the curtain. "You've really lost it. You think walking out there with a microphone makes you somebody." "I don't need to think it." I turned to face her. "I am somebody." She stepped closer, her tone dropping. "This little stunt of yours, whatever it is, will backfire. You'll end up exactly where you started, irrelevant." I took one measured breath. "You mean the place you built your career off of pretending I never existed?" The look on her face hardened, like I'd cracked a mask she'd worn too long. Before she could retort, a sound technician passed by with cables slung over his shoulder. He gave us a polite nod and disappeared through another door. Silence followed, heavy, full of all the things we never said. "Funny," I said finally, "you always talk about reputation and family image. Yet you're the one who keeps breaking both." Isolde's brows drew together. "What's that supposed to mean?" I reached into my clutch and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. "You should probably recognize this." She hesitated before taking it, eyes scanning the heading. Cease and desist order. Her pupils widened as she read further. "You had a whole campaign launched using my name," I said. "The Opel Vectra project, remember? That viral video where you claimed you were supporting a former employee who'd fallen on hard times? That employee was supposed to be me. Her jaw tensed. You're overreacting. It was just branding. A story. It was fraud, I corrected. You forged my consent forms. You impersonated me in meetings with clients who thought they were working directly with me. You took my reputation, turned it into your prop, and built your image off it. She laughed, a sharp, hollow sound. You wouldn't dare expose that. It would destroy the family name. I filed that letter 2 weeks ago, I said, nodding at the paper in her hand. And if I remember correctly, there's a court hearing scheduled for next month. You've already been subpoenaed. Her face drained of color. For the first time that night, I saw something rare, fear. Not the kind that came from losing money or fame, but from losing control. You wouldn't, she whispered. I tilted my head slightly. You really should stop underestimating me. It's a habit that's costing you more than you realize. She tried to laugh it off, folding the paper and shoving it back toward me. You're bluffing. Even if that were true, no one would take your side. You've been gone too long. You don't have the influence to touch me. I smiled. That's where you're wrong. You built your empire on borrowed credibility. And you borrowed it from me. Her voice cracked slightly. You think the speech will fix anything? That saying a few rehearsed lines on stage makes you some kind of hero. I'm not interested in being a hero, I said. I just don't like thieves pretending to be visionaries. She stepped forward, lowering her voice. You'll regret this. I took a slow breath, calm, steady. You've already had every chance to make things right. I warned you. You didn't listen. Isolde's hand trembled slightly as she brushed her hair off her shoulder. You can't just walk out there and rewrite the story. I'm not rewriting it, I said. I'm simply reclaiming my chapter. A brief silence fell between us. Somewhere in the distance, a cue light blinked. A producer's voice called out, "Sponsor announcement in 1 minute." Isolde looked toward the curtain, panic flickering in her eyes. You're not supposed to be the one out there. You're not even listed. Check the screen, I said. What? Go ahead, I told her, stepping past. You'll see it soon enough. She turned, waving her hand toward a stagehand. Stop her. She's not part of this program. The man hesitated, headset crackling as he checked the schedule on his tablet. Ma'am, actually, she's a registered sponsor representative. Isolde froze. That's impossible. I met her gaze one last time. You built the stage using my name, Isolde. Now you'll watch me take it back. She laughed weakly, the kind of laugh people use to cover the sound of something breaking inside them. You think this will change anything? They'll forget you tomorrow. They always do. Maybe, I said, stepping toward the curtain. But tonight, they'll remember exactly who you are. The lights dimmed. Music swelled. The audience's chatter faded into a collective hush. A showrunner motioned me into position. Isolde's voice echoed behind me, desperate now, stripped of glamour. Wait! You can't do this. Too late. The curtain parted slightly. From where I stood, I could see the massive screen above the stage flicker to life. White text glowed against a black background, sponsored by the Opal Vetra Foundation. A murmur rippled through the crowd. A few people clapped. Others whispered. I could almost feel my sister's confusion like heat at my back. The showrunner whispered, "You're on in 3, 2. I inhaled slowly, letting the noise of the room fade into the distance. The air smelled of flowers, perfume, and tension. Somewhere out there, cameras waited, but so did the truth. I stepped forward. The curtain lifted. And as I walked toward the spotlight, I thought only one thing. This was the moment they stopped writing me out. She used my name for attention. Now the world will hear it on my terms. The curtain was still lifting as I stepped into the light. For a breath, maybe 2, the crowd didn't quite register who I was. That brief pause, those few seconds of uncertainty, held more weight than any applause. I could see faces tilt slightly, people nudging one another, squinting to connect a name to the woman now standing at the center of their perfectly choreographed evening. I didn't rush. My steps were measured, steady. The designer cape Avon had delivered to me moments before was draped elegantly over my shoulders, the hem catching stage light just enough to draw curiosity without screaming for it. Beneath it, The torn remnants of my original dress remained untouched. I hadn't changed out of it on purpose. The damage wasn't something I wanted to hide. It was the story. At the far end of the stage, the host of the evening stood poised, holding his microphone like a seasoned conductor waiting to hand the baton. When I reached him, he smiled, probably thinking he was introducing just another sponsor with a check and a practiced smile. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "please join me in welcoming tonight's primary sponsor." I reached gently for the microphone. He looked surprised, but let it go. I turned to the crowd. Hundreds of eyes were now on me. Some polite, some confused, a few already intrigued. "Good evening," I said. My voice rang clearly through the space, picked up perfectly by the hidden mics embedded along the podium. "Before I deliver the remarks you were expecting, I'd like to share something that wasn't in the program." Somewhere near the middle of the audience, I saw Isolde. Her smile froze on her face, lips parted just slightly, head tilted in disbelief. "This night," I continued, "celebrates not only fashion but legacy, what we build, what we pass on, and how we remember those who helped create it. That's why this moment means more to me than any speech I could have rehearsed." I paused. Let the silence work for me. "My name is Opal Vetra. Some of you may not recognize that name. That's okay. You weren't meant to until now." A stir moved through the audience like a soft wind. For the past decade, I've worked behind the scenes in this industry. The fabrics many of you are wearing tonight came from the innovations developed by my team. Designs that make luxury more sustainable, more accessible, more honest. My company, the one funding this event tonight, has done so quietly, anonymously. Until now. I glanced briefly toward the back of the room, where media screens displayed the event sponsors. I saw my name now flashing in full, Opal Vetra Foundation. Earlier this evening, someone made a mistake. They assumed I was a waitress, a guest who wandered in by accident, someone unworthy of standing in this room. A few gasps, some soft murmurs. "I want to thank them," I said, because in that moment, I was reminded that the reason I built what I built was not for recognition, but for reclamation. Of my time, my voice, and my name. I reached under the podium, lifting a framed document and holding it up for all to see. "This," I said, "is a contract signed by my late mother. It names me co-founder of the Vetra Trust, a role that was never publicly acknowledged because it wasn't convenient. But tonight, convenience isn't the priority. Truth is." From the front row, I saw someone from the foundation board lean forward. The man next to him raised an eyebrow. I was written out of a legacy I helped shape. Silence when I asked for transparency. I was told to keep quiet, for the sake of family, for the brand, for the illusion. And I did for a long time, but I didn't disappear. I paused again. I rebuilt. The room was still. Not a cough, not a rustle of silk. I clicked a small remote hidden inside the podium. The main screen behind me flickered, then shifted to a short audio clip. A familiar voice, Isolde's, echoed through the room. "Opal, she's harmless. Always was. I mean, come on. The girl's smart, but she doesn't know how to play the game. You give her a few crumbs of attention, she shuts up. Always has." The clip ended. No music. No transitions. Just that line, hanging like fog over the velvet seats. Isolde's face in the crowd turned a shade of disbelief I'd never seen on her before. I returned to the mic. That was recorded during a meeting with investors, shared with me by someone who thought I deserved to know how I was being represented. I didn't name Avon. I didn't need to. I share this not for sympathy, but for clarity. Because when people ask why I chose tonight to finally speak up, the answer is simple. I was tired of watching someone else use my name while I swallowed the silence. I let that settle. Then, with a softer tone, "This isn't just my story. It's the story of every person who's been sidelined, underestimated, spoken over. It's about every woman who's been told to wait her turn, only to find the line was never moving." A pause. Then applause. First a few claps. Then more. Then the room stood. They weren't applauding a scandal. They were recognizing a truth, one that had been hidden in plain sight for years. I stepped back, nodded, and turned from the mic. As I walked off stage, I didn't look for Isolde. I didn't need to. The spotlight wasn't hers anymore. Funny how easy it is to take something back when it was always yours to begin with. I barely made it 2 steps off the stage before the first flash went off. Then another. A sea of reporters and photographers had shifted their attention so fast it was almost dizzying. Just minutes ago, I'd been an invisible afterthought. Now I was the headline. A woman from the PR team brushed past me with a tablet in hand. "You're trending," she whispered, not even stopping. "Every platform. Top 3 on Twitter, TikTok, even the live stream replays got 500,000 views already." I gave a nod, more to myself than to her. I wasn't chasing numbers. I wasn't chasing anything anymore. I had simply stepped into a space I should have occupied all along. As I walked toward the backstage press zone, the clapping still echoed faintly behind me, a strange mix of celebration and shock trailing in my wake. Several people approached me at once, journalists, bloggers, assistants, phones out, voice memos recording, questions flying. "Miss Vetra, why now? Did your family know you were going to speak tonight? Is it true you hold controlling interest in the Vetra Trust?" I raised a hand gently and offered a measured smile. "I'll be making a formal statement soon. Tonight was about truth, not spectacle." The cameras kept flashing. One reporter leaned in a little too eagerly and asked, "How does your sister feel about the reveal?" I looked him in the eye and said plainly, "That's a question you'll have to ask her." And they did. While I was being ushered into a side room for a moment of quiet and bottled water, Isolde had gathered a small group of her own, flanked by stylists and 2 foundation members. I caught a glimpse of her as the crowd split. Her hand clutched a press release that had never made it to the stage, her smile brittle, the kind that stretches but never reaches the eyes. She was talking fast. That much I could tell from across the hallway. One of the board members crossed his arms. Another was checking something on his phone with a furrowed brow. "She ambushed the event," Isolde was saying. "She wasn't on the official docket. This was a breach of protocol." One of the junior PR girls muttered. The screen literally said sponsored by Opel Vetra. Isolde either didn't hear or pretended not to. "She's not even affiliated with our current campaigns," she added, louder this time, trying to redirect the energy. This was personal. She manipulated the moment to embarrass the family. What she didn't know, yet, was that the dress-tearing incident had gone viral. Multiple camera angles, different voices in the background. One video had captured her words, "Throw her out. She's not even supposed to be here." The clip was spreading like wildfire under hashtags like Met Gala Meltdown and Vetra vs. Vetra. I sat down in the press suite with a bottle of water, keeping my posture calm while the world around me started doing exactly what I'd anticipated. Watch. An hour later, just as the night began to settle, the next blow landed. It started quietly. A tweet with a video. Just 47 seconds long. No caption. No filter. Just raw audio and a shot from someone's phone camera, blurry at first, but the voices were unmistakable. Isolde, sitting in a room, clearly mid-conversation, unaware she was being recorded. She's a liability. Always has been. Honestly, donors don't care about names. They care about image. And hers. Not exactly marketable. We use her where we need her, then cut the excess. Simple. The room she spoke in was in public. Judging from the decor, I knew exactly where it had been, one of the conference lounges at the foundation office. Another voice in the video asked, "And the interns?" She laughed. "Interns. They're glorified servants with better hair. Let them run around and feel important." The video ended. No explanation. No defense. Just that. Within minutes, reactions poured in. "Disgusting. How do you mock your own sister and your staff in the same breath? Pulling my donation now." This is what happens when people with zero humility run nonprofits. Isolde's team scrambled to respond. A statement was issued claiming the clip was heavily edited and taken out of context. But context didn't matter anymore. Perception had already taken root. 3 corporate sponsors pulled out of her upcoming charity gala within 2 hours. One designer issued a public apology for collaborating with her brand. Another donor posted screenshots showing they'd requested a refund. I didn't need to lift a finger. That was the part she never understood. I didn't need revenge. I needed the truth to stand where I no longer cared to. Just after midnight, as the last of the guests left the gala and the cleaners began stacking empty glasses, I received a phone call. Unknown number, but I recognized the area code. Miss Vetra, the voice on the line said. This is Denise from the Foundation's internal board. I just wanted to inform you we've received multiple formal complaints this evening regarding Isolde's conduct. I said nothing. There's already talk of a motion for review. It could happen within the next few business days. I leaned back slightly in the chair, watching as a staffer wiped down a silver tray nearby. What would you like us to do? Denise asked. I swirled what was left of the water in my bottle and answered evenly. Do what you feel is best. There was a pause on the other end. Then a soft, respectful, thank you. When I hung up, I looked across the dimly lit room. The stage was now empty. The curtain had long since closed, but the ripples were still moving, still shifting the shape of the story that had been told for too long. Turns out, you don't need to burn someone down when they're busy setting fire to themselves. It had been 4 days since the Met Gala. 4 days since I stepped into the light and let the truth speak for itself. Outside the Vetra Foundation headquarters, media vans lined the block like vultures, circling a story they didn't fully understand. Inside, the walls were quieter. Not silent. There were still the murmurs, the polite good mornings from staff who now looked at me differently, but the air had shifted. I walked into the boardroom slowly, deliberately. The door closed behind me with a gentle click that might as well have been a gavel. This wasn't the kind of room you stormed into. No, it demanded precision. And I had waited a very long time to sit at this table. Not as someone's shadow, not as the sister they used and discarded, but as who I had always been. A full voting member. A name on the founding document. A voice they could no longer deny. The boardroom was filled already. Some looked up when I entered. Others kept their eyes on their papers, pens tapping or fingers scrolling. They were nervous. I recognized it. Not because they feared me, but because they feared the consequences of having ignored me. Isolde sat 3 chairs down, to my left. Her makeup was thinner than usual, her hair less sculpted. Her voice, when she finally greeted me, was barely above a whisper. Opal. I offered a nod, nothing more. Let's begin, said Gerald, one of the board elders, his voice firm but not unkind. We've convened today to address the recent events that have brought national attention to this foundation, its structure, and its leadership. I reached into my leather folder. Before we do, I said, I'd like to establish something fundamental. All heads turned. I stood slowly and opened the folder. I have here a series of documents, some of which have never been entered into the official record, though they were signed and witnessed by members of this board. I handed copies down both sides of the table. Each paper bore the same letterhead, the same title, Intellectual Property Assignment and Technology Patent Transfer. These documents confirm that I hold sole ownership of the technology underpinning the Vetra Smart Fabric platform. That includes material prototypes, API systems used in gala integrations, and the licensing framework used by partner fashion houses. Someone near the end of the table let out a low whistle. Gerald adjusted his glasses. One of the younger members leaned forward. So she owns the engine. I nodded. Correct. I watched Isolde's face pale again, though she didn't speak. I continued. These contracts were signed by our late mother and updated before the trust was transferred. My name appears on every version, until the most recent set of board filings, which conveniently removed it. No one moved. I took my seat again and folded my hands. I'm not here for vengeance. I'm here for accountability. Isolde cleared her throat. This is all unnecessary. We're sisters. I turned to her slowly. You tore that word up the moment you tore my name out of our legacy. She opened her mouth, then closed it. The room remained still. Gerald spoke next. Given the documents and the recent conduct concerns, I'm calling a vote. Motion to suspend Isolde Marin from all active board duties until an independent audit can be completed. One by one, the hands went up. No one hesitated. Even her allies didn't defend her now. The silence was colder than I expected. Not satisfying, not triumphant, just final. The motion passed. Isolde sat frozen, blinking rapidly, as if her body hadn't caught up to the reality her mind had just accepted. When the meeting adjourned, people filed out slowly. No one looked at her. A few nodded at me, respectful, acknowledging, but no one was celebrating. This wasn't the kind of victory that felt like champagne and applause. I stood, gathered my folder, and walked toward the door. Outside the boardroom, a reporter stood with a notepad and recorder, waiting like a sentry. She stepped forward as I exited. "Miss Vetra," she said gently, "how does it feel to finally be seen?" I paused, then offered a small, knowing smile. "I wasn't invisible," I said. "They were just blind." I left the building without another word. The breeze outside had a different feel now, less biting, more crisp. I took a deep breath and looked up at the building that had once held every reminder of my absence. It didn't anymore. Power wasn't something I seized. It was something I stopped giving away. 2 weeks passed. Just enough time for the noise to settle, but not enough for the dust to fully clear. In the quiet of my home office, I finally had a moment to sit still. Not because I had nothing to do, but because for once, I didn't need to react. I wasn't scanning emails for damage control. I wasn't waiting for the next ambush, the next media headline, or the next betrayal hiding behind a familiar face. The window next to my desk framed the soft Carolina afternoon, pale blue sky stretching over the trees. It was a view I'd taken for granted in the past, always moving too fast to appreciate it. But not today. Today, I let the quiet settle over me like a blanket that had long waited to be used. My laptop sat open in front of me. A dozen tabs glowed along the top of the screen, most of them articles, clips, or interviews from the Met Gala aftermath. One headline in particular had gone viral. The real queen of the night wasn't in gold, she was in truth. I clicked it, watched the video play again, even though I'd seen it 100 times. My voice rang out, clear and steady. My name flashed on screen. Isolde's reaction, frozen mid-frame, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just watched. Not because I needed validation, but because after years of being invisible, it felt strange to be remembered in full color. The cursor blinked in the corner of a new document titled simply, Letter to Isolde. It wasn't something I planned to send, but I needed to write it anyway. "I don't hate you," I typed. I just finally chose myself. The word sat there, unblinking. "You tore me down for years," I wanted to say. "And for most of that time, I let you." I told myself I was keeping the peace, preserving the family, honoring the memory of parents who didn't know how deep the cracks ran between us. But in truth, I stayed silent because I believed I had to earn my place. The worst part wasn't what you took. It was how easily you convinced everyone else that I didn't deserve to exist inside the story we built together. You taught me something, though. Not what you intended, but valuable nonetheless. You taught me how to stop waiting. I paused, fingers hovering above the keyboard. Then I highlighted the entire paragraph and hit delete. Some words are better left said inside your own head. I closed the document without saving. Later that day, just before sunset, I drove out to the cemetery on the edge of town. It wasn't planned. My hands just turned the wheel as if they already knew where I needed to go. The grave was simple. A stone slab with my mother's name, birth date, and the words, "She gave more than she took." I stood there for a long while. The wind whispered through the trees above, carrying the faintest scent of honeysuckle. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a single white rose. Not red, not pink, just white, clean, uncomplicated, quiet. I crouched down and laid it at the base of the marker. "You always knew, didn't you?" I whispered, not expecting an answer, just saying it because it needed to be said. You knew what Isolde was doing. You saw it. You let her do it anyway. Maybe because you didn't want to break the illusion. Maybe because you didn't think I was strong enough to survive it. But I did. And standing here now, I wasn't angry. I wasn't hollow either. Just whole. Grief changes. So does silence. What used to suffocate now protects. What used to hide pain now holds peace. I stood up, brushed the dust from my jeans, and made my way back to the car. That night, I poured myself a glass of tea and returned to my desk. There were contracts to review, a podcast interview to prep for, and a proposal for a mentorship program I'd been designing quietly for young women looking to break into fashion tech. Just as I opened the folder labeled Founder's Circle, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Hi, a nervous voice on the other end said. Is this Miss Vetra? Yes. Speaking. My name's Maya. I'm a student at UNC Charlotte. I saw your speech. I read everything after. I want to learn from someone like you. I know you probably get a lot of these calls, but if there's ever a chance to intern with your company, even just shadow for a day, I smiled. Real soft. Can you email me your resume, Maya? A beat of stunned silence. Yes. Yes, absolutely. Thank you. We ended the call, and I sat there a moment longer. Not because I needed to collect myself, but because I was proud of the version of me who finally stopped asking for permission. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is stop asking to be seen and just start building anyway. Sometimes, silence isn't weakness, it's preparation. Carlisle didn't shout, didn't scheme loudly, and she didn't beg for validation. She waited. She built. And when the time came, she let the truth speak louder than revenge. What would you have done in her shoes? Have you ever stayed quiet when someone tried to erase you? Let us know in the comments below. And if stories of quiet strength, justice, and redemption speak to you,